Afternoon and welcome to our Wednesday weekly creativity workshop with Adobe Education. Today is Wednesday, April 24th, and I'm excited to be joined today by Mark DuBois, who is a longtime Adobe Education leader and a professor emeritus of web systems from Illinois Central College, and he's also the executive director of webprofessionals.org. So today Mark's going to be sharing using variables with Adobe Captivate. Mark, I will hand it off to you.
Sure, thank you so much. If I could get people to just enter into the chat real quick, what your experience is with Captivate, or is it Capta what? I see Suzanne is interested to learn more. Jonathan is Capta what? Everybody else is shy. Okay, well, I'll make the assumption we know very little about it. Now, with respect to Captivate, it does not come with the Creative Cloud, so it is a separate product. It's a separate subscription, etc. And the latest version is 2019. A lot of people that I've talked to, colleagues, often compare Captivate with PowerPoint. You've probably heard of that. And it does slides and so forth. But Captivate does so much more. In fact, there's a book that I have that just came out on Captivate, just the fundamentals, and it's over 700 pages long. So there's a lot of things you can do with it. And that's why I thought we'd talk a little about variables today. So to begin with, when you're working with variables in Captivate, we come into Project, Variables, and we have a choice of either user variables or system variables. I'm going to go ahead and choose the system variables as a starting point. Now, if you don't know too much about computers, and I'm sure you do, so I'll go through this quickly, but variables are basically used to store and retrieve data. Think of them as name-value pairs. And within Captivate, like I said, you have system as well as user variables. If we take a look at the system variables, we see that we have things like Captivate version, and we've got a description. Then we have all sorts of additional ones. Notice the size of the scroll bar. So if I scroll down here a bit, you can see that we have, well, who's the author? That's the name of the author as specified in the properties on the project. And we've got copyrights and all sorts of things. And what I've done is I've actually included a number of variables on this particular page. Now, since we don't have a lot of experience with Captivate, I'm going to come up here to File. I'm going to do a new project. We'll just call it a responsive project. And we'll wait 2 seconds. So here is the untitled project. And if I wanted to show any of this information, I can include this as a text caption. Now, I should mention there's lots of capabilities within Captivate. We can assign themes. That's what you see here. We can do a whole lot of things, but for right now, we'll just put a text caption in. And for the text caption, oops, Clara, you're in the way, so I'm going to have to move this just a bit here. Oops. And I moved it too much.
We have a quick question actually from the chat,
Mm-hmm.
Mark, from Erica. So highlighting the primary differences between Captivate and Spark.
Oh, yeah. Spark, you can do little images. You can do a web page. You can do some of the fundamentals. But Captivate allows you to create a very custom environment. You can build your own variables, your own themes. You can add whatever you want. You can have branching. So much more than what you can do with Spark. And maybe we'll get an idea here in just a bit. Does that help, Clara?
Erica says, thank you. So perfect.
Excellent. So I have moved the screen down just a bit here because we have properties in a library. I'm going to click on properties, and properties, we'll move this up just a bit now. So we have a text caption. Let me just go ahead and I'm just going to delete that. Add a brand new one in just so we can see for starters. So it says type text caption here. There's lots of things we can do with that individual caption, but what we're focused on are variables. So I'm going to insert a variable, and if you'll notice, my cursor is pointing right here on the X. I do wish they'd improve this part of the interface because it is a bit hidden. But it says, well, what variable do you want to insert? We'll insert a system variable, and then we have to select the variable. So we'll choose, how's about current date and time? We'll do that as a date string, and we'll click OK. And with that highlighted, I'm going to change the color so it's a little easier to see. I'll make it Web Professional Blue. And now you see we've included a variable on the screen. I know that's truly exciting. The end result, if I were to include a bunch of variables, I can see all sorts of things like this. I can see the current date, the version of Captivate. I can pull all sorts of information from the Captivate interface. For instance, if I come up to Files and Project Information, I can see that under General, I've added an author, email, website, all sorts of things. And the end result is what you see here, published as a web page. So you'll see the date, the time, Captivate version, all sorts of additional information. Plus, if I wanted to, I could click on this list of system variables, and this will take me over to the Adobe Captivate help, and you can see a full description of all the variables that are available. I know that's thrilling. So what else can we do with it? Well, we can work with user variables. So user variables are things that you define. And in this case, I have a text entry box, and this text entry box is associated with a variable. So I'm going to come up here to Project, back down to Variables, and you'll notice that one of the variables is set as username. Not going to do anything with it at this point. We'll close out of that. We'll come back to a working example. Go on to the next slide here. Put in my name. Click Submit. And we'll look for the next slide to go. Patience is a virtue. I lack it, but I entered Mark. And if I were to come back and enter something else, it would show me what I entered as well. So again, variables are just places to store information. So why on earth would we care or want to use or do something like this? Okay, I have been teaching for a couple of decades, and I'm going to share with you something that happened with me repeatedly. I'll make the assumption it never happened with you. I've taught online and in-person classes, and more than once, I've had a student come up to me, and the student has asked, Mark, I don't understand this project, this assignment you want me to work on. Oh, really? Well, did you look at the materials that I spent hours developing? Well, no. Did you read the supporting material that I searched for and tried to find and keep current? Well, no. Did you read the other supporting materials? Well, no. No, I just don't understand. Okay, so basically I got tired of that foolishness. And what I started to do is come up with, if you're going to talk to me about this, I want you to prove that you've actually done what I ask you to do. In other words, you can't even talk to me, you can't even ask me questions unless you have completed a quiz over the materials that I provided. And you'll notice we have the visitor full name here as a variable. You can tell it's a Captivate variable because it has the $2 signs in front, $2 signs at the end. So I know no one else has ever experienced that as a teacher, have they? This is your opportunity to respond.
I just posted in there, definitely have experienced that many times.
Oh, I'm sorry, were you speaking? Yeah, it just drives me crazy. Okay, so how do we go about doing this? Well, since we don't know that much about Captivate, I'll walk you through some of the basics. All those that want to learn more about Captivate, just raise your hand. Okay, so the first thing I do is ask for a name. And then you click the Submit button. Obviously, you want to provide some basic information. And then I go ahead and let's assume we have a quiz. So we've already provided all sorts of materials and links for people to review before they come into class and actually start working on a project. And because of that, we're going to ask maybe a multiple choice question, a hotspot question, and a sequence question. And then we'll get the score results, and then we'll display something. Let's see what this actually looks like as a working example. So I've already loaded this example. And again, these are all linked out on the page. Okay, so the first thing it does is ask for my name. Oh, here, I'll do this for you. Galan. Did I spell that right?
Yep, that's right.
Okay. And so what's the proper definition for the word nonplussed? I like the English language. Going to choose. How's about we're utterly baffled? And we can check to see. Oh, look at that. We're correct. Oh, it's almost like I wrote the quiz. And then we can click continue to go to the next one. Now, there was a fellow back in the early 1800s, 19th century, that worked very hard at removing all Greek and Latin words from the English language. And he wanted to come up with words that were English specific. So he created a word called welcome fire. And what is welcome fire? I shamelessly stole some images from NASA. Any ideas? Oh, come on, somebody take a stab at it. See, starting on the left, we have a picture of a meteoroid actually. We have the planet Jupiter, we have the sun, we have the moon, and we have the Milky Way. Well, somebody has to tell me which one to choose. Clearly, you haven't reviewed the materials. Everybody's so shy. Oh, somebody said the sun.
Yep.
The sun. Okay, so let's click on the sun. And Erica, do you think you're right or wrong? How much are we going to wager? This is like Jeopardy. And Oh, nope. Oh, actually, it's the meteoroid. But that's okay. And so we'll go on to the next one. Now, this one, adjectives have to be in an order. We're never taught this in school, but if I talk about my big old toe or my old big toe, sometimes something just doesn't seem right. So how do I arrange these? We have different adjectives like age, opinion, shape, size. I'll do this for you. Opinion, then we add size, then we have age and shape. So the last two are just right. And if you don't know, here's a link. Yeah, I know you can copy and paste. I can provide it at some point. And we click, yep, we were correct. And then, oh, by the way, we got 66% right. Okay. Now, those of you that asked about the difference between Spark and Captivate, I challenge you to do any of this in Spark. And oh, by the way, If you use a learning management system like, I don't know, Canvas or Moodle or Blackboard or any of those, you can tie this all directly in. If we wanted to, we can review the quiz, or we can go on. Well, let's review the quiz first. And it'll tell you, hey, we got that one right. See, it's showing here. This is a correct one. That's the one we chose. Yeah, that's why I wanted your name associated with this, Clara. And now we can see we got these in the right order. Okay, well, we'll go on to, there's more variables. These are just some additional system variables. We can go back here because I went too fast. You can see the details. And then the certificate. Oh, Clara. See, you got 2 answers correct. And we could put in a module name, etc. That's what you can do. And it really got to the point where I would ask students to do a screen capture. You know, you just email it to me. That's all you have to do, but that's your entry into being able to ask questions in the course. And believe it or not, it worked pretty well, especially when you get into public humiliation and all that. But eventually, that is what I used for almost every class that I had. Now, how did I go about doing that? Okay, so in the wonderful world of Captivate, I can come in and I come up to the menu, and there's the ability to add question slides. Now, for our purposes, I'm going to go over here to this sample one that we're working with, and I'm on the first slide here. I can actually put in basic property information because that'll show up in a table of contents. But then I can say, you know what, I want to add a question. And you can also import question. You can make a pool. You can have random questions. Do all sorts of things. But for our purposes, we'll just choose a question slide. And these are the choices. I know you can't see it that well, but you might want to zoom in. Multiple choice, true, false. Yeah, I never use those. Fill in the blank, short answer, matching, hotspot, sequence, and random question. You can also do a survey. That's grayed out because I said it's a question, but you can ask for that. So just for grins and giggles, we'll choose multiple choice, and we'll just add one multiple choice question, and we can indicate whether we want it to be graded, a pretest, a survey. So obviously, those of you that are listening to this that are educators know that you might want to have people do a pretest, see what they know about the materials before it's actually graded, and maybe you want to do a survey, etc. Just for grins and giggles, we'll leave it at graded. We'll click OK. And you'll notice we got 2 slides added. Well, I asked for a slide. The second slide, that's the results slide. So that comes in automatically. And for this slide, you know, question 1 of 1, it's multiple choice. You type the question, you type the answer, and you go from there. So we could come in here, which is on the US $5 bill. And then we can come in and put in the answers. We come over to quiz. You notice we have 2 answers? No. I want at least 4 answers. You know what? I want to shuffle the answers. And oh, look, now we have different answers here. Obviously, well, maybe I want the numbering to be 1, 2, 3. I can change all sorts of things. And we could put in here, well, let's see. I know you don't want to watch me type. And now we have 4 answers. And obviously you can see which one is correct. We could then go ahead and add additional questions in. But that's how I built this. So I came in here and first added a multiple choice question, which I color-coded based on the theme. I next added a hotspot question, and you'll notice the hotspot is defined as the same size as the image. So as long as you click anywhere in this photo, then you'll get credit for it. And you can only have one hotspot. And then I can sequence things. So that was just back to the different choices. Again, if I wanted to, come up here to quiz, question slide, and there's a lot of other things you can do. So I chose sequence, hotspot, and multiple choice. But you could also do matching, fill in the blank, short answer. The one thing to be careful of, as is true of most learning management systems, is the fill in the blank, who is on the $5 bill? Well, someone could answer A. Lincoln, Honest Abe, Abraham Lincoln, and so forth. And you have to account for all those choices. So it just makes it a little maddening, and that's why I typically stick with multiple choice. Matching, hotspot, sequence. The random is if we pull things in from a question pool, and we'll save that whole discussion for another topic.
We have a quick question from Suzanne. Can you do polls with Captivate?
Yeah, you can do polls. You can set it up as a survey. So you can ask specific questions like on a Likert scale. You can ask free-form questions, because remember, when I am choosing quiz questions and I select a short answer, one of the choices is survey. So you can collect all this information, and you can either collect it anonymously or you can collect it for each student. If you're doing a pre-test, that sort of thing, you might want to know for each student so you have a better idea of where they need help. Does that answer the question?
Yes, and then Suzanne also had a follow-up question. How do you get the results and the overview?
So what you can do, and what most people do, is they tie these Captivate modules into a learning management system, in which case they have what's known as a SCORM Manifest, SCORM, shareable, content, object, model. I'm missing a letter somewhere. It doesn't matter. You can look up SCORM. If only there was some like search engine you could use. But what this will do is directly ties in to your learning management system. And so you would see the results for each student. Now, I should mention that Adobe also has their own learning management system called Captivate Prime. You pay per student per month, but that is another alternative. Typically, schools use things like Moodle and Canvas and those kinds of learning management systems, and that's how the information would be pulled in. And let's see, if I come up here I come down to quiz preferences, and right here, do I want to enable reporting for this project? I would say yes. You could choose, maybe I'm using Moodle. You can indicate the version of SCORM you want. You can go in and configure it. And then what will happen is when you publish this, it's published as a zip archive. And once that zip archive is published, you then import it into your learning management system. I could indicate, the settings, so I could give the quiz its own unique identifier, indicate if a student passed or failed, what the options are to pass or fail. I can even put default labels in. And although we don't have time today to talk about it, I could actually go in and add a little JavaScript so I could have a random array that I choose from that has, hey, things like correct, you did well, pat yourself on the back. Nobody else is going to. Or you made a mistake and you might want to try this again, review the material. Or if you really feel ornery, you ignorant dolt or whatever. No, I'd never do that. But you can have all sorts of fun. And again, that could be a separate topic. But you go through, identify what you want to do for the quiz as a whole, and then when you're ready to publish, you come up here to File, and you can include Publish Settings. And Publish Settings include some things you might want to think about. For instance, accessibility. We have the ability to do geolocation. We have default colors that we want to use. Do we want things to be auto-sized? What do we want our recordings to be? Project as a whole, quiz, we already got into that. So you can do all sorts of things. And when you're ready, then you'd come up to File and down to Publish, and it'd ask you where, and then it fills out the information. And that's what I've already done with these examples, and just generated the information and put it on a web server. Do we have additional questions? I mean, I can go a number of different ways.
I don't see any questions here in the chat right now, and then Suzanne said that cleared that question up for her.
Okay. Well, we shall move on. So let's take a little time and focus on Captivate and advanced actions. Now, in this particular one, I'll show you the end results first. So we'll come over here, and we'll ask for our name. Now, it says, wait a minute, before we put our name, you know, we just celebrated, or some of us celebrated, Easter holiday. And in a lot of environments, you can put in what are known as Easter eggs. Surely I would not have done this in this particular example. And as they said in the movie Airplane, don't call me Shirley. So, Easter egg hunt, a hint. Well, I could put a name in, I could put my real name in, or I could put in, oh, look at that, enter Fred Durf as your full name. Now, if you're wondering why I use Fred Durf, hi, I'm Mark, and I'm a lazy, lousy typist. Look down at your keyboard and see if you can figure out why I picked on Fred Durf. It's pretty straightforward, isn't it? And now I click Submit, and oh, look at that. It opened up a brand new web page, which takes us to Web Professionals. Isn't that special? And you could, that is a little Easter egg, a simple Easter egg. Okay, so how did I go about doing that? Well, first and foremost, we've got our properties over here, and we have this text entry box, but I also added another button. Now, how do we go about that? Well, let's come back to a somewhat empty slide here. And for interactions, we can come down, we can either do, well, in this case, button, a click box, drag and drop, and there's all sorts of learning interactions. But for this case, we just put a button in, and oh, look at that. The button name is buttoned. Yeah, button, button. Who's got the button? No, we'll put in Easter egg hint. And of course, it's not properly sized, so we'll now make it bigger. We can do all sorts of things with it. Well, that added the button, but what do? I'm looking at properties here. Well, let's see, there's style, and I put the caption in. I can even change things like the text color. Okay, that's disgusting, but I can do that. Oh, look, there's another set called actions. What could I do? On success. So if someone clicks that, what could I do? Well, first thing I need to do in order to make this really work is I'm going to have to come here and I'm going to put in a text caption. And the text caption I'm going to put here is basically enter Fred Durf. And we'll highlight that and we'll change the color because that's not easily viewed. Okay, so now we have enter Fred Durf. We'll move him up here, except that's visible. We can change the name caption from text caption 3 to something else, but we'll just make it invisible. And now let's come back over here. And when we click this button, what do we want to do? Well, we don't want to go to the next slide. We have a number of choices. We can go back to a quiz. We can jump to a slide. So we can do branching. We can open up a web page. We can send email, execute JavaScript. We'll talk about advanced actions in a bit. We can play audio. We can hide things on the page, or we can show things. Oh, let's show things. Well, what do we want to show? Well, we want to show text caption 3. Now, obviously, I'd give these better names, but in the interest of time, that's what we did. So now on success, we show text caption 3, which is this little puppy right here. Text caption 3. That's what's known as an action when we click this button. There's a number of other options. There's lots of choices. I think you're starting to see that this is bigger than a bread box. So those are actions, things like opening web pages, etc. We also have advanced actions. And I'm going to show you what an advanced action looks like. So I'm going to come back to Project and Advanced Actions in the menu. And I've already defined some actions. So in this case, I put in entered name. So I named this action Fred. It's a conditional tab. So that means the actions are like conditional expressions. If this, do something. If it's true. If it's false, you'd want to do something else. And the action that we're going to perform, the visitor full name, that's the value that we entered in this text box here. Is it equal to, and I just manually typed in that literal Fred Durf. If it is, if that's true, then we're going to open up a URL and we point directly to Web Professionals. Isn't that clever? That's what an advanced action is. You can do all sorts of things with these. Come back over to this example here, and we'll come back to our advanced actions. Now, we don't have a lot to work with, but we could create from blank. We're going to give it a name. Let's see, we used Fred already. We'll use Wilma. And we could say, well, what do we want the action to do? Or we could add a new action. That's what's going on here. We can come back. We can double click on these and rename these. So we'll call this the Wilma action. And you can remove these other ones. We just click on that. But okay, what do I want to do? Well, I want to add a command. Now, it's going to tell us that the code we have entered is invalid. That's the little warning. Danger, danger, Will Robinson. We're going to have to select an action. What do we want to do? Well, maybe we could go to the next slide, return to a quiz. Oh, look, these actions are very similar to the actions that we already saw. So if we wanted to, we could show a table of contents. We could do all sorts of things. We'll just say go to the next slide. That's an action. When that Wilma action is executed, it would go to the next slide. And we would specify that on the success, it would execute an action that we have now named Wilma. Alternately, we could say, well, if it's a conditional tab, if, and now we could decide any of the conditions are true, all the conditions are true, or we can be custom, and then we can come in, we can add a particular action. We're looking for a variable or a literal. We select a comparison operator, just like all that programming stuff that you tried to avoid years ago. And you'll notice the default is an and out here, and we can compare things to system variables as we want. So we can name all sorts of stuff and save it. We can save it as an action, or we can save things as a shared action. What's a shared action? Well, let's cancel out of this. No, we don't want to save any of this because I haven't done much. And oops, I'm going to move this down just a bit. Okay, in Captivate, as is true in most environments, there are a number of different ways to do things. We've got a menu up there at the top. We have icons that allow us to do all sorts of things. And over here we have properties and we have a library. The library allows us to have actions that we can share either across multiple parts of one project, or we can share things across multiple projects. So now we can get really, really fancy. And see, in our library, we have shared actions. Now, I am just touching on the highlights today, but hopefully this is giving you a little bit in terms of ideas, some of the things you can do with Captivate. I'm going to go back and see if there's any questions, because I feel like I'm racing way past people.
Yeah, I don't see any right now, but if there are any other questions, please do post them in the chat. I know a couple more people have joined since.
Okay. So
Dan
one
says
of the
he's
things,
learning a lot of new things, so this is great. Oh, is there a trial version to play with? Erica asks.
yes, Erica, there is a trial version. So you can go out to your favorite search engine and look up Adobe Captivate, or you can go to the Adobe site and look under products for Captivate. And I believe, you might correct me if I'm wrong here, Clara, but you can download a version and I think you get a 15-day trial, after which you can't use it. Well, you can use it, but you can't publish anything. That's after the 15-day trial. Now and I'm not a salesman for Adobe, so please correct me here if I'm making false assumptions. You can spend a fair amount of money and buy a version of Captivate, like the current version 2019, or like the Creative Cloud, you can pay for a subscription, and that subscription you can then work with every time there's a new version that comes out, then you get the latest version. And I think that's something around the $25 a month.
Yeah.
I may be misremembering.
I'm pulling it up right now. So it looks like you get a 30-day trial.
Oh, is it 30? It used to be
Yeah.
15.
Yeah, we've upped it, I think. And then, yeah, there's a couple different packages that you can purchase here. So, yeah, I'm happy to share. I'll post the website I'm looking at right now in the chat here.
Yeah, so to answer the questions is no, it's not in the Creative Cloud subscription. Although Adobe, if you're listening to this is Mark's plea that it really should be included. There's a whole lot of reasons, and I'm not the only one that's ever brought that up. And is there a discount if you have a Creative Cloud subscription? Not that I'm aware of. I defer to Clara on all of that. And I see such a pensive look.
Yeah, so I put in the chat. Thank you for that feedback. I'll share that with the team. But as part of the Community Campus Leaders and Education Leaders program, there is a complimentary Creative Cloud annual license. But I will look further into Captivate specifically and what we can do from that angle.
It is a very useful tool. And oh gosh, I have used it for years. The capabilities with variables, again, we're just ruffling the hairs today, but there's so many capabilities. Although I don't want to dive into it in depth, there's all sorts of geolocation capabilities. And let me embarrass myself here, because I hadn't planned on talking about this as a whole, but the project, oh, where's it at? Publish settings. Somewhere in here, it allows you to do, maybe it's under general, you can do geolocation. And we'll actually just cancel out of that. Come back over here to a specific example. This is one that does have geolocation. Oh, I know it's here somewhere. Yeah, I'm embarrassing myself. Vision's not my strong suit, and I can't always find the specifics. But that being said, you have the ability to do all sorts of geolocation. That's good news and bad news. So we'll go back to this example, which I know has geolocation, and we'll reload the page. We'll cancel out of that. But you'll notice it says the website would like to use your current location. Allow, disallow, remember it for 1 day. And therein is the problem. So yes, you can actually be specific with geolocation down to, I believe it's either 25 or 50 meters. So if you wanted to do a campus tour in Captivate, you can do it. The downside is people often say, don't allow. And therein is the problem. Because if you don't allow, then you don't have the geolocation capabilities. I'm going to just click allow, cancel out of that for now. So again, that's just a starting point. Oh, hi, Lucas. I do want to leave plenty of time for questions because we've just started. Again, I did make an offer a while back, I could do an entire series of these on Captivate because there are literally thousands of options. One of the things that we haven't talked about at all is there is a community. And of course, it wants me to sign in. I'm not going to sign in right now, but there is a community, and you can download all sorts of assets.
Exchange? I can find the link. It's on the Education Exchange?
No.
Oh, no.
No, it is a separate community, a Captivate community. We can have access to Adobe stock, free e-learning assets. This comes as part from eLearning Brothers. And we could choose casual. And there's all sorts of people. So if you wanted to use different people as part of your project, you can do that. Let's see if I can do this without signing in, because in theory, I've already signed in. Yeah, so we get templates, we get characters. And in terms of templates, you've got games, all sorts of things you can do, scenarios, different themes, that's different looks and feels. We'll choose games. And these are different games that you could use. Parachute game is like Hangman. You have so many chances to answer a given question. Game shows like Jeopardy. You get a number of choices. And some of these are aimed for a younger audience. Although, frankly, I've had fun with college students with some of these as well, because we're all kids at heart, aren't we? Characters, you can do photorealistic characters. And there's just a bunch of different characters that are out here. Just all sorts of, note as I scroll, the scroll bar gets smaller and smaller. It's like social media where you think you're at the bottom. Oh, but wait, there's more, and yet more, and more, and it just keeps going. So you can find, something that looks reasonable, and you can preview it.
We have a quick question, Mark, from yes. Lucas. Is there any interaction between Adobe Captivate and Character Animator?
Lucas, that is an excellent question. To the best of my knowledge, the answer is no. Should there be? You betcha. But I am not aware that you can do it today. Now, you can generate, sure, I want to go down this rabbit hole too far, but you could generate a video and then pull that into Captivate, but that's about the closest I think you can get today. Unless, Clara, you know more.
No, not to my knowledge either. And that's something that I can reach out to the character animator team, ask kind of what's on the roadmap or if they've have any inclinations towards that.
I think it would be very beneficial. And again, that's one of the reasons, if this was tied into the whole Creative Cloud, then there'd be much more cross-pollination between products. And I think that would be very helpful. I mean, you have things like Adobe Stock Assets, which you can, well, in theory, there we go. You can download and use Adobe Stock Images. So obviously there's some tie-ins with the parts of the Creative Cloud. And Lucas, I guess I answered your question. And my assets the same as CC Library? Again, the answer would be no. That is a separate environment. Gosh, if only it was part of the Creative Cloud. So we've got media assets, project assets, themes. These are all examples that I've downloaded just to show people in previous discussions. And if we wanted to, just to show you a look and feel, here, let me cancel out of this. Come over here to the one I've been working on, and we'll come back into assets. We'll come over to themes and try and pick a particularly hideous one. It's thinking about it, and we'll apply. All object styles and properties will be lost. Do you want to continue? Do you want to experience a left hook? Sure. I haven't felt one in a while. And boom, we're done. Isn't that special? That actually kind of goes in with the Easter egg hint, doesn't it? But we could then go in, make all sorts of changes. Now, one of the things I talked about, I think it was last year, Claire asked me to do another one of these, was the idea where we could include interactive videos. And that's something you might want to reference. I think we talked about that in November, if I remember right. So let me add a new slide in. Slide, we just put a blank one in. And now if we wanted to, we could add an interactive video, either from YouTube or computer. And then you can pause the video and ask a question. And that can be part of your quiz score as well. What else can I touch on, just so we have some ideas? We can publish for different devices. We can publish, well, for apps. We can publish to Captivate Prime, which is the Adobe Learning Management System, or we could publish to that old chestnut Adobe Connect. So there's different options there. Obviously, we can preview things. Oh, one of the things I should mention, okay, I'm going to come over here to record, and you'll notice that we have the choice here for closed captioning. Because I haven't recorded anything, I don't have anything at the moment. Let me change this so we actually calibrate it. Testing, and that's good enough. Hello world, this is a test. Now we have a waveform, which we can actually go in and edit. So I could highlight parts of it because I know that's not going to display properly, and I'll set the level to 0, so I'll add some silence in. I can whack parts of this. But the most important thing is I can come in here and now I can add closed captioning. So if you have an audience, for instance, web professionals, we donate a lot of our programs to schools like the Illinois School for the Deaf. Captioning is not an option. Okay, so you definitely want to enter the appropriate information. You can also put in slide notes and so forth, and then we could go ahead and save that. close
And
that.
Mark, we have a quick
Yeah.
question, or it's more of a comment now from Lucas.
Mhm.
If for closed captioning, you can write in other languages, but it looks like it's manual, so you would be
Yes.
able to write in any language then.
You can write in any language. Yes. And depending on how you do it, gosh, there are ways of generating, they're called SRT files. So you could have multiple languages. I think the easiest approach within Captivate is to do branching. So Damien that does a lot of work with Captivate. So let's say he's doing a tour of Belgium. You might speak French, you might speak English, you might speak German, you might, any one of a host of different languages. So you could set up branching, and within that branching, you could have buttons that take you to, hi, I am a German speaker. And then you'd go to the section that has Deutsch and the captions associated with that if you are unable to listen and so forth. You can also include demonstrations, and that's what the CPVC slide is all about. We've covered a lot more than just variables. Auto captioning would be wonderful. There are other products that use it. Camtasia, there I said it. But having used that product for years, it's like Dragon Naturally Speaking. It works well for about 82% of the time. And the rest of the time, you just rip your hair out. So you have to go through and manually make updates, particularly when you're discussing technical topics. Oh, I don't know, web design and development. You do maybe 60% of changes. It just does not reflect and understand. I'm sure with AI, one of these years it'll improve.
Great. Well, I want to make sure in terms of time, if there are any other questions, feel free to post them in the chat here.
Yes, please.
And for those who are watching the recording, what is the best way to get in touch with you and access some of the resources that you shared today?
The easiest way is to just send me an email. Which is now in the chat pod. You can also call if need be.
And just for those, if you can't see the chat pod in the recording, it's Mark, M-A-R-K, at webprofessionals.org. And then Mark just shared 662.4 WEBPRO.
Yeah, so if you just look it up on your phone, that little keyboard that comes with it, you can call as well.
Well, Mark, I really appreciate you taking the time today to share all of this with us and your very in-depth knowledge of Captivate. And hopefully looking forward to another session where you can share more.
I'd love to do that, Clara. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And again, if you have further questions, please get in touch with me. Oh, we did set up a Slack group as well a few years ago. So if anyone's interested in that, just send me an email and I'll add you into that as well.
Perfect. All right. Thank you for tuning in. And we look forward to seeing you again next week, next Wednesday, at 12 o'clock p.m. Pacific time for our next Wednesday Creativity Workshop.